Well, we can go ahead and get started. We have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order.
We have Laura now.
Laura's here as well. Okay, great. Welcome, Laura.
Hey.
So first of all, I guess the big announcement, we swore in Chief Mark Anglin on at our official meeting at the beginning of the month, but he started the week following and he is now with us in his full capacity. So we welcome Chief Mark Anglin.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. It's been an interesting week thus far, and we got a lot of work to do.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and I know you're excited and interested in all the opportunities. So look forward to working with you as well. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move into the committee reports, and we'll start with Cheryl Reddy and Trees, Parks, and Recreation, just because she's the first one I see.
Okay, we have ordered the trees for the Emery Street Restoration Project. They are to be picked up next week, so you should see planting going on soon after. We also discussed the invasives project and are about ready to send a recommendation on those, but we need a few more discussions about that.
Anybody have any questions of Cheryl?
Just as a reminder, Arbor Day is going to be at the next council meeting, since Tree City has authorized communities not to have a full-blown thing because of COVID. So we're going to do it much like we did last year. We'll make the proclamation and then the Friends of Trees Award, and that will be it.
Thank you. It was that slipped my mind, but I know we had some email exchanges internally about that. I wasn't sure whether y'all wanted to try an outdoor event, presuming nice weather, or not. But I think we can move forward with just as you described.
Okay.
So thank you very much. So Bill, is there anything from the Planning Commission? Any updates?
No, sir. We actually did not have a meeting we didn't have enough. We had nothing really to bring forward for the meeting, so we didn't have that.
Yes, just notable is something you've mentioned previously, that we are seeing an increase in interest in some of the undeveloped properties in town. So people are going around there, first of all, they're looking at the tax map and the aerial, and they're going around, they're talking to property owners. And so I think the Planning Commission anticipates some conversations forthcoming pretty soon about development, which likely would require rezoning. So we'll have a chance to talk about that coming up in the coming months, I suspect. All right. The Downtown Development Authority. Mike, anything to report for that, or you guys?
No, we did not meet in December, and our meeting will be next week. And we've got some of those RFPs back that we're going to be probably talking about, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
We had talked previously about having the committee of council members that we appointed to come to your meeting in January, next week, I guess, and just being able to make sure we're having a free flow of conversation between the council and the DDA about plans and priorities, et cetera. Has anybody mentioned that to you, that you've seen, as far as putting? I know, Bill, you work on the agenda, so you'll work with Brian to make sure that's on the agenda. Trying to remember now who the committee actually is.
Didn't
believe
Jeff
it was
volunteer?
Jim and Jeff, I believe.
And Laura.
Yeah.
Jeff and Laura. Gotcha. Yeah. So there'll be, hopefully you all will put that on your calendar to join the DDA meeting.
Okay. And that's when? Next week? What?
Next Tuesday at 7 o'clock.
Tuesday, 7 PM. Okay. I'm sorry, is anybody else's phone out?
But out.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry. But is anybody else's phone out? My phone's out. I'm calling on my cell phone right now, and I can't get onto the internet. I can't get onto anything. I had the computer all set up here, and all of a sudden my phone's gone.
My internet is intermittent.
Yeah, okay.
Uh,
Well, all right. That might be the whole thing. Okay. That's okay. Next Tuesday at 7 PM. Okay, I'll get the information. Thank you.
Are there any updates from the Sustainability Committee? I think Laura McCandless, you might be the only one here that can represent that.
Yeah, we continue to sort of narrow down some ideas for projects aside from the GOSP grant. Melissa and I had a really successful meeting with the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission, along with you, David, and Bill. And that was clarifying in a lot of ways on many topics. So we're moving forward with that. And I think that we'll be reviewing along with the TPR board the complete streets and trails plan at some point soon, in a month or so, I think. So, and then that'll come down to the council after that.
Bill, I'm trying to remember, did we brief the council yet on our meeting with the GDOT folks?
I think only in my email.
So just, I guess, relevant, Laura, to the meeting that we had with Northeast Georgia and with the UGA, with John Calabria from UGA, and is they were gonna look and see whether a safety audit had been done on Emory Street. If not, would initiate that process to, because that helps establish a baseline of need for the street as far as looking at the traffic counts and the relative safety of the street, and whether there are improvements that need to be made from GDOT standards. And they said there hasn't been guidance yet on the infrastructure funding that's anticipated, but they have heard that it might very well be that the money will come straight from the federal government to the cities. Or, you'll request the money directly to the cities, but the Federal Highway Administration and the local state or the state departments of transportation are not in favor of that. So more to follow. We'll wait and see. We made it clear to them that we were, interested in seeing some improvements on 81, including the overpass, and that we wanted to. And so they said, make sure you're working closely with Covington and the county, and really talking about Highway 81 with Porterdale, and so that we have kind of a unified voice on what we would like to see happen with Highway 81. So anyway, it was a good discussion. Once again, didn't leave a whole lot of promise for using the cattle tunnel for a throughway for a trail, but it's possible, I guess, if we wanted to seek funding for that, but it would be a big project. They'd have to basically bore a new hole under the interstate because that current one's not sufficient.
Well, I appreciate, since I brought that up about 15 years ago and hammered on it, I really appreciate you seeing it to a very logical and engineering type of end instead of blowing it off and say you just can't do that. Thank you.
Yeah. We wanted to hear clearly, what are the reasons why it isn't feasible, and what other, options there might be.
David, did you have an opportunity to point out to them the cracks in the revetment that's there, that John had found?
Yeah, and they didn't. They said, they'd have to, obviously it'd have to be assessed, but they didn't think those were like structural in the sense of
Okay.
of the tunnel itself, as far as they understood. They did acknowledge that the bridge across I-20 is probably going to need to be replaced. Bill, what did he say, within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, sir, that's correct. I believe he made the comment that he wouldn't see it being there, in 10 years, it'll be different. It'll be a new bridge.
I would like to reiterate that I think the college should be in on any conversations about the bridge, because they probably have some clout in areas we don't have clout. And it would, that's something they can give to the city of Oxford that they can't do other things. But that would help them, I think, because they don't allow so many students to bring cars. And Lord, it's just reasonable. I would
And they-
also like to see that some thought put into rerouting the intersection of Geiger Street and 81, maybe down to Haygood and then out. What's the name of that street? Is it Marshall? A block down from Geiger. That's just an amazing intersection to me every time I go through it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we and we talked about, so the I guess the relevance of the bridge itself being replaced is, well, do you want to spend a lot of money on a pedestrian bridge, which was the original, the previous plan, or does GDOT want to look at the replacement of the bridge as a whole project that would include making the bridge provide more of the complete streets amenity as a whole, and so that you're replacing the bridge and installing that pedestrian access amenity. And Jim, to your point, perhaps in the midst of all that is an opportunity to address the complexity of that area where you've got, West Street, Geiger Street, all kind of coming in right next to the overpass and creating some interesting interactions. So we talked about that it might be good for the cities and the county to talk about what we would propose going forward. And then it is a sort of unified request to GDOT, and certainly having Emory University throw its voice and cloud into the discussion would be beneficial. But essentially saying they're open to it. It's just going to take us getting the funding to do it. But,
It seems to me that you could build a pedestrian bridge a whole lot faster than you could replace that bridge.
you could. It's just that they're saying if they're going to be replacing the bridge, in the I don't want to say short term.
5 to 10.
Well, most
Maybe they want to do it all together.
most pedestrian and bicycle traffic would and or golf cart traffic would prefer to be isolated from motor vehicle traffic.
We can touch on this in just a minute, because we were thinking about that might be part of the LCI we do, is to look at that interconnectivity as part of but yeah, no, I mean, I think so. The point is that they were open to it. They just wanted us to get with our local partners and have a common vision for what we'd like to see, and to come engaged collectively, since there were at least City of Covington and Oxford involved in that overpass, but really all the parties that need to be supportive of what we're going to do.
David, you mentioned money, but all the money for a bridge, no matter what style, is going to be GDOT money, right? Because that's a state route.
If it was the state replacing it, then yeah, I mean, you would think it would be just part of their budgeting process, et cetera.
Okay.
The question partly is can we leverage the fact there's all this additional infrastructure money that has been allocated, and elevate the timetable for that bridge being replaced, so that it's also relevant to the conversation about pedestrian improvements. And Jim, you make a very valid point that maybe it needs to be separated from the and certainly there needs to be some physical delineation of pedestrian space and vehicle space and all that in the design. But it's interesting because they said that they would have to probably raise the bridge because they would probably be using those concrete beams that you see in construction these days instead of the metal beams that they used in the past. And that, yeah, there's just some topographical challenges to raising that bridge. So anyway, there would have to be a significant amount of engineering, a study and analysis for the replacement project for that bridge. But it was a fruitful discussion. And I think it was just an opening discussion, and they appreciated us reaching out and coming, and meeting with them.
Well, at this rate, if I'm still alive, I want the Oxford to rent a rickshaw and haul me across it.
Jim, you'll appreciate it. We did also talk to them about the, rerouting designation of 81 around, around the loop, basically 142 around. And Bill mentioned that in his email, that there's that section from 36 over to Flat Shoals Road, which is a county road and would need to be approved to be brought on into the state system. That it meets the standards of the state. And if not, they would need to be upgraded, et cetera, et cetera. So there was some question about that, but they would certainly, if that's something that all the parties, Covington, Oxford, Porterdale, Newton County are amenable and are advocating it for, then they would be willing to explore that with us.
Isn't 142 a state route?
It is down to 36 all the way.
That's what I mean. So that part of the bypass has already been approved for state route.
Yeah, it's if you continue westward from 36 on the bypass, that segment that goes by, what is that, Indian?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That middle school.
Goes on down to intersects with 81 and
Runs
becomes
into
Kroll
81
Road.
down the other side of Porterdale.
And becomes Kroll Road.
Yeah, that section is county road.
But it was built to the same standards as the other part, one would think.
One would think, and we can, and so just saying they were open to that if that's what everyone wanted to advocate for.
That sounds fabulous.
So a lot of topics that we talked with them. Sorry, that was all under the guise of sustainability. Well, Avis headed up our committee on race, and I'd like to reconstitute that. So I want to think about and open to recommendations from you all who we might ask to chair, and maybe change the committee to basically being diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and look at those broader set of issues that Avis's folks were looking at. Her committee was looking at, which include some of the signage for local landmarks and memorials, and how we might amend those to better reflect the complexity of the history instead of some of the old biased narratives that we have. And then also how we might do something similar to what Emory is doing on Oxford campus in acknowledging the role of enslaved persons and other African Americans in the history of Oxford. So those are things that we didn't make as much progress on as I would like, but I want us to continue that. And then also looking at any other things we can do to continue to foster a culture of anti-racism in Oxford. So please do send me your thoughts on email individually, and I'll bring back a recommendation at a later date. I think that's all the committees, right? All right. So next item is discussion on city signage. And, Jim, you prompted with your kudos of the Downtown Development Authority sign in the in the green area there. And we made note of the need to clear out some of the confusing signage. But what this prompts is the need to move forward with something we've talked about, but haven't actually ever implemented, which is a comprehensive wayfinding plan and that defines the different sign families and the design of those different signs. And so we have a standard that's implemented across the city. So Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I don't know if we need to go through the little PowerPoint or not, but I had contacted the sign company that did the Oxford Farmers Market sign, and she said, sure, she'd be glad to work with us on putting together, a group of signs for the city. But then her first question was, well, what size do you want, this sign to be, for instance, near City Hall? And, right there, I was like, well, I really don't know. She didn't know either. And so it just started begging a lot of questions of, how you really put together what's commonly known as a sign family. So they're great at fabricating signs, but not necessarily, so much as designing various signs that we might need for various uses. So that leads to the question of whether we should, look at a company. I found two that I thought might be worth talking to in Atlanta, and frankly, I've kind of lost the name of one of them. One of them is Sky Design, who I've worked with before. They did work in Gainesville, they did work in Duluth. They're kind of all over the Atlanta area. They're probably the leading company in Atlanta. But I did kind of, through just looking at Google, found another company that I thought would be worth talking to. But so I put together this PowerPoint just kind of to show y'all where I felt. Well, we have some signs out there. Some of them point to, places and don't tell you where you are when you get there. For instance, the old church, there is actually really no readable sign at the old church. So this was just kind of taking, this PowerPoint slide here was just kind of taking to show that, you can kind of start from a very large area. This was Flowery Branch off 985, and we were kind of looking at 3 different areas around the exit, what we called Old Town, and then at a library site out at our large subdivision there. And then we kind of narrowed it down into Old Town, and even so getting people from 985 from exit 12 over to town. And then once they got into town, telling them where they go to eat, where they go to park, where City Hall is, where the police department is, etc. Is kind of how you break that down. So I don't know if y'all have any questions about that or how we might want to move forward, but.
One of the examples that Bill, you mentioned was when you talk about parking, and we're trying to let people know there's parking for the market, and of course parking that's used for court on that, one day a month, one Thursday a month. But it's hard to really read and understand where the sign is directing you to for parking. And so, having maybe something, and plus going 35 to 45 down 81, are you going to really see it, notice it? So maybe having something like more, you'll see like the big P for parking. You'll see this in urban areas all over the place to direct you. I know it saved us when we were in Europe, even, to looking for parking. It's sort of almost a universal sign that means public parking. And so a sign that's kind of consistent, maybe design wise, with the one that's been placed there for the Oxford Market, but that is specifically designated parking that's available. So I think there are a number of different improvements. Like you said, while there's a sign out on 81 that says the old church and points to the left, when you get down to the old church, there's a historic marker and there's a little plaque in front of it, but there's not a sign that says old church.
Well, I really think that it's an opportunity for the city to create an identity, in the sense that we have a lot of resources here that are either owned by the city or under city control or whatever. I mean, from the church to the cemetery, obviously the City Hall, the park. I mean, even the park itself, the Asbury Street Park, doesn't actually have a sign indicating it's a city park until you get down to the level of reading the rules. So it would really be better when you pull into that. I think I pointed this out in my PowerPoint, but the thing that's interesting to me about Asbury Street is that Asbury Street, as y'all know, is parallel to 81. So if you're thinking I'm going to Asbury Street Park and you're driving down 81 looking for Asbury Street, you're not going to find it. And so it's a little difficult to know where to turn. It's not that we have to change the name of the park. It's just that we need signage that shows you this is where you're going. So when you pull into the parking lot there is an Asbury Street Park sign, but it's actually on a banner, some feet above your head. So we would need to standardize a font and a color, both for Public Works building and for our park and all that, and address, and maybe even a QR code or something. There's a lot of times what people use now.
First of all, Asbury Street was a placeholder. So it could be, the street could be dropped and it could be Asbury Park without any issues. That would help that. But that round sign is a very distinctive sign. And that would go a long way to separating everything from Emory University. All respect to Emory University, but we aren't Emory University. We're Oxford, City of Oxford. And I would think that the old church sign on 81 needs to be changed to something similar to what's at the park there. I mean, the greens area with an arrow on it, and not take it too far. The street signs could be changed to smaller versions of the same sign, round. I think the roundness is distinctive and the sign itself is distinctive. So I just don't think it would be necessary to get a company involved in a town this size, because you just make a sign that still had City of Oxford on the circumference of it with a big P in it. That accomplishes the same thing, does it not?
Well,
And so it would seem to me that it could be a lot simpler than it's being made out to be. No offense, Bill. I think you did a great job on the other stuff.
This, Jeff.
Yeah,
Can I
go ahead.
interject a thought?
Sure.
We need to identify what places we want signage put up. I think a list needs to be made. Somebody can, if Bill wants to get together, and I'll be happy to help get together and make a list of places that we need signage, or we feel there should be signage put. Then we can decide what kind of sign and what amount of signs it might take to identify those particular places and how to get there. So myself, I'll be happy to help. Bill, if you want to get together with me or whoever wants to join me, if you do too, Jim, and just make a list of the places we need identified and signs at, and then we can go from there. I mean, to me, we're beating a dead horse here and talking about different types of signs and so forth, where they need to be. We need to identify those places first. That's my opinion.
We did that in a study. I think it was on the website at one time.
Apparently, you can hear me, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I want to say to Jim, don't you have your notes from when we did this about 5 years ago with Kate Lee?
Yes, that I don't know whether I still got my notes or not, because it was another thing that was put on the shelf to collect dust.
I mean, we've
But
done
it was on the website at one time.
right. I mean, we've already developed a wayfinding map.
Yep. That
Well,
we did.
I mean,
We
if
did a
we
lot of wayfinding work, but we never did something that is distinctly Oxford. When somebody sees the sign, they know it has something to do with the city of Oxford.
I know
You
that's
ride down Emory Street, you see those blue signs, you know it's got something to do with Emory University, period, paragraph. So you start, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you start paying attention to.
So if one of y'all if those of you who were on the council at the time, maybe could find a copy of this wayfinding plan that you said we have. If you have it, Bill can obviously look in, files that if he can, but
Jim may have it. I looked for mine all day today. I couldn't find it after I saw we were going to be talking about this.
It
Okay.
should have been, it may have been included in that big book, the big book of studies we had. So I'll look and see. I don't know whether I've still got it or not. I've just,
Well,
it was done with KB Lee down at the center. If I don't have it, maybe Jared's still got it. I'll check with him.
well, I think part of what we want to avoid is what happened years ago when we had a committee to look at signs for city limit signs, and they came up with the blue signs that were thrown up, and we called it a day. And, you know, instead really trying to, as the point you're emphasizing, Jim, of what signs are sort of our signature signs, and where do we need to place them in order to, you know, help people know where certain key assets are located, or when they've arrived, those kinds of things. So, well, let's let Bill see if, and you guys, if you could help track down that past work, because I don't think, Bill, I don't know if you have seen that.
I'll do what I can. You know, and Bill, if you want to meet up, I'll meet up with you and Jeff or anybody else for that matter. Because this to me is a significant thing for this community.
Bill, I mean, Jim, I totally agree with you. And I think if we can get that information, I'll be happy to help, and let's see what we can come up with. So as soon as, you know, give it some time, let Bill and Jim and George, if you got, you know what it is, talk to somebody and let's see if we can come up with it.
I got to look on my plate right
So
now.
we have a company that will fabricate the signage, but they don't do design and typesetting. Is that the situation?
They don't do wayfair planning, wayfinding plans, and you know, they don't do the sort of, they'll design and make, I think, any sign you want to your specification.
I'm not familiar with the wayfinding, so
It's just a way of laying out on a map the interesting points that we want to emphasize for the city of Oxford, and a means for people to find it without assistance.
Yeah, if you imagine you are someone who's never been to Oxford and you're coming here for a wedding at the old church, or to meet up with a friend at the park, you know, what do you need to make sure you find your way? And like Lynn Pace said that he was meeting a friend over at the park, and there's no street address for the park. So the friend tried to put it into Google Maps and, you know, wasn't able to find the park that way. So there are a variety of things. You look at it as coming in as a visitor. Okay, well, let's,
can I make a couple of points before we leave this?
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I would really appreciate it if the DDA would take a long, hard look at the number of signs that are right there in that little wad on the corner of Clark, and we're just about the point of having sign pollution. So, you know, I think that would help things somewhat if we could maybe come up with a way of dealing with all of that that's there. And just as a matter of interest, my dog took me to the park today, and there was a lady there filming. She was walking around with her camera, phone camera, making a video of the park. I have no idea where she was from, but I thought it was quite interesting. And anyway, that's for what it's worth, just so you guys would like to know.
Before we do move on, Laura, did you have any questions, comments before we move forward?
Nope. I'm excited to see a sign family. I have to say I really admired the aesthetic of the flowery branch sign family. Not necessarily for Oxford, but I just thought that those were an attractive collection. And I thought that the sampling illustrated the different varieties of sign that could work in concert with each other design wise. So that was nice.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarification for the minutes, Mr. Wyndham, you started to mention the corner of Clark and another street, and you didn't mention the other street.
81.
Okay, thank you.
There's a cluster of signs and posts and whatnot there, and I just, it's visually confusing and unappealing. And you know, I don't know whether anything can be done about it or not. I just would appreciate it, since the DDA is kind of controlling that, if they would take a minute, take a look at it.
All right, well, let's, so moving forward, we'll, see if we can't get the assemblage of information from the previous work in that regard, and then, Bill, will get together with those of you who've expressed interest and get some further input, and we'll bring this back up for discussion next, work session. All right, Livable Cities Initiative, with the Atlanta Regional Commission. I'm going to turn this over to Bill, but just y'all remember we had, I'm blanking on the gentleman's name from the Atlanta Regional Commission, come and speak to us at our planning retreat about the LCI program and fund. Jared, yeah. And so Bill's been looking into the requirements for applying for an LCI funding. So Bill, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all had time to look at all those materials, but you know, the due date for the application is February 28th. And so sort of the issue is, you know, our next voting meeting is on the 7th, and then we've got a work session on the 21st. So we would need to either have a special called meeting or try to vote on the 7th or something to try to have something turned in by the 28th. But so that's kind of the first issue I guess we might want to talk about here. I talked to a consultant who's familiar with LCIs, and he felt that to do an LCI study in the range of, I guess, the size of the community we're looking at and the different issues that we're kind of trying to tackle, he felt that the $185,000 would be a good budget for that effort. And then if we were matching that 20%, it'd be, you know, $37,000 to us. So that's just, you know, another key point is kind of the budget we're talking about here. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, but
You found some
we've
more.
covered this at our planning meeting quite a bit.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, Mike, ready? Go ahead.
it's, as I recall back at the retreat, when this was brought up to the council at that time, it was, everybody there wanted to proceed with this. And it was just a matter of what cost and what percentage. So based on what I recollect from that conversation, I think it's a good direction for us to go. And we should vote on it on the 7th and move forward.
Comments or questions?
Two each.
Yep. Anybody? Okay, so I mean, can we take the silence as agreement with Mike that, you know, it's worth spending the additional time and effort on Bill's part to put together a proposal that we can review and approve for submittal we'll vote possibly at our February 7th meeting. If not, we'll have a call meeting at our work session so that it can be submitted by the due date of February 25th, you said? 28th?
28th.
28th.
Works for me.
You know,
Days, any dissent, I guess. Okay. All right, well, we'll move forward with the proposal then, Bill.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, the next item is the Yarborough House. And as you know, we had a lot of discussion about it at the retreat as well, and had discussed having the house removed through a variety of ways and getting proposals for what that would cost, or, you know, whether it be someone who'd be interested in taking it, deconstructing it for materials, or even moving it as a whole, or just demoing it. Since then, I think there's been some thought to rethinking that idea, and possibly give another concerted effort, maybe the first real concerted effort to seek out proposals for use of the house. so I guess there's a couple ways we can go. One is we can just go with the recommendation that came from Melvin Baker's committee a couple years ago when or soon after we bought the house, and make the sort of minor improvements that were discussed that I think Laura McCandless and Lynn Bohannon and I talked about a year and a half ago, and see what those would cost that would make the house essentially habitable or usable for a history center, and then enter into some sort of lease agreement, short term maybe, with the historical society to allow them to then design and create displays of various history information, memorabilia, etc. And see if people come and enjoy this new place. It could be a place where people meet as well, but just the point is to make it a public place with where you can come learn about Oxford and possibly have small meetings. So there's that way, or there is, hey, we've got this house, here's the specs of the house, putting it out there very broadly and proactively, and seeing if anyone would say, yeah, if you'll do X, I will lease this for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years to do, to have this in there, to have to have a law office in there, or to put a coffee shop in there or whatever, but a concrete proposal against which we then would make the improvements to the house. And then that entity would occupy the house. So those are a couple of ways we could go. So just wanted to bring it back up for consideration. I know Laura shared her thoughts previously, but Laura, anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I just appreciate you being willing to put this back on the agenda for tonight and to discuss other options. Just the more I thought about it, the worse I felt about taking down that building without because I don't think we've really made a concerted effort, certainly to market it to the broader entrepreneurial public. I don't know that we've spoken to anybody over at the Chamber of Commerce or anything like that, or really made an effort to see if there is someone who would perhaps pursue your law office type concept, not a law office you understand necessarily, but that kind of direction. And I just feel like it's worth it. It may not, I expressed my feelings in the letter, which everyone got via email, so I won't rehash that.
Mhm.
Anybody else have a comment or thought, question?
I don't have a question. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir, Mike.
We've gone kind of round and around with this Yarborough house since we bought it. And some good ideas have come out, and Laura's sort of correct, is correct in that we should give it one last look. I think we need to go out and find out if there's any interest, and that'll make our decision about what to do. If there's no interest, then I don't see us investing any more money into the building. But if there's an interest that would help us pay for the improvements at least, then I think that's a viable option.
So Mike, you are specifically saying commercial interests in use of the building, not the public use of the building as was proposed by Melvin Baker's committee.
Yeah, his committee came up with some ideas, and it kind of got wishy-washy. Nobody really sat behind one particular facet of it, even though we looked at as a library and public use. But the public use thing then brings in a little bit more funds required to bring it up to snuff. But if we had a commercial interest in it, that could change the picture of what our city's investment it really is.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments or questions?
we had a commercial commitment from someone, that would make me a little more inclined to support investing more money into the building, to bring it up to whatever standards we needed to. So I think exploring it is definitely, you know, a good option.
Thanks, Lynn.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
was there interest in the Oxford Historical Society for the Arbor House?
There is. No, the Oxford Historical Society is interested in operating a public space where you can see history, learn about Oxford, et cetera. You know, you can call it a museum, you can call it a history center, visitor center, but a place where you can come and where we can show some of the, you know, history, and people can learn about Oxford. So yes, they are.
With that, I would like to say we're talking about using signs to further define our identity, but our old buildings are part of our legitimate identity. And I would also support the Historic Society if that was seen to be something that we could go forward with. I don't mind the minimal fixes that we talked about before and letting them have a go with that and see if it's used. But that's part of our identity, the history of this town. I mean, that's a big part of our identity. And if we're worrying about signs, we might as well keep some of the old houses and buildings too.
Thanks, Barr. Any other comments?
I started working on a draft today of a request for proposals, which of course I'll share with people before we do anything with it. I also have a couple of contacts at the chamber that I could reach out to.
Well, it may be worthwhile to reach out for possible commercial uses. But originally that whole thing was predicated on the thoughts that was as historic significance. And old for the sake of old is no better than new for the sake of new. And that's just a fact of life. And if we could do, and as far as architectural significance, the only thing that's architecturally significant about that building is maybe the floor to ceiling windows. We allocated a good bit of money to deal with that before, and then when they found out there was not historically significant, the kibosh was put on that. And we looked at a history center, we looked at a welcome center, we looked at met with the library to try to do something with the library. Given that money could be much better spent doing other things that a great deal more the citizens of Oxford would participate in and enjoy, in my opinion. And I just don't think it's a good idea to throw good money after bad money. And it's just, I don't agree with it.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Any other comments or? Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. All right.
Just one other question. Thank you very much. Is there a stated vision by any organizational entity associated with the town for the Arbor House?
Stated vision.
Or a problem statement. I mean, just is there some sort of goal that's been articulated and accepted by the town?
I think that there have been a couple different documents that have been prepared since we acquired it. One by Eric Oliver, one by the committee that was headed by one of our former council members. And then, you can point to our comprehensive plan for the city, which is something we update every 10 years, that lays out the desire to share the history of Oxford, but there's not, I mean, there's been ideas, I guess, put on paper, but there's not like I would say there's not a grand vision that's on paper. I think if you asked certain individuals in town, they could give you a grand vision that they have for the house.
You might want to consider spinning up a task force that is charged with giving you and the council this grand vision within a certain period of time, and just to try to get something down there that you can debate. Right now, we don't have anything we can really debate.
We've debated a good bit of it before, and
Very true. Very true. But it fell off the radar scope a year or so ago, and now it's back on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, they're definitely, for example, there's definitely the question of do we want to reserve the house for storytelling, you know, and public use, or do we want to make it available for commercial use? I think that's kind of some two fundamental questions. If we see it as a city asset that we want to use for the former, then yeah, having a clear sense of what does that look like, and how would we gauge if that's been being successful? I don't know how formalized that's been made in the past. Someone mentioned that a survey had been done, and I honestly don't remember like who that survey went out to, how many respondents there were, etc. Jim or George or Mike, do y'all remember? Was that something that Melvin's committee did? And do you remember like how many people responded? Because certainly know that there's a handful of people, particularly those that are members of the Historical Society, which were behind the idea of a museum and visitor center, but I don't know the extent of the input from the survey.
I think there was Melvin put a survey together that went out in the mail like so many of our other surveys, but I don't know that I can recall how many respondents there was to that. But I think I don't have his thing, his part back in front of me to look back into it, but I think he took into consideration the handful of people that probably responded.
Well, I guess the takeaway is.
Well, I'd like to say that, as I've said before, and I said it when we started on this Yarborough House thing, and they're talking about making it a visitor center or a welcome center. My wife and I traveled a lot of back roads because that's what we prefer over expressways. If we have any sort of time at all, that's what we do. And we stop in thousands of little towns at their welcome centers, and most welcome centers you could put in a closet, and it would be more than adequate room. It just seemed like a really grand idea that just does not seem to come to fruition well. But mainly I suspect because we're not on the expressway and people are hitting that all the time, we would probably get a few people doing parents' weekend from the college and that sort of thing. But what did we allocate to repair that thing and bring it up to public use before? $300,000 to $400,000, George?
That's about what it was.
Yeah.
$300,000. That's the problem we got. There's so much work that needs to be done to that place. It's not practical to do, in my opinion.
And I think
George, you were trying to answer.
I think you can blow by $300,000 in a heartbeat.
George was trying to answer your question or address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question he asked me, Jeff answered about the same way I would answer. is that the amount of money, I mean, we've had studies about we should do this, do that, but none of that effort came to fruition. So we found out it was gonna cost so much money to do that building in order to be able to use it, but what benefit we will get out of it, it wasn't worth it. That's what we decided a long time ago.
Well, then let's
Yeah.
try the commercial route and let's try to market it and see if there's someone out there in the entrepreneurial community who's willing to partner with us on that.
Well, I
So-
think that's exactly what was said during the,
All right, Mike just come up with a good idea that we hadn't thought about before, had not done, to put it out and see if anybody wanted to do something with it. That's what I actually we do with it. Other than that, that's why I hadn't commented, because I've talked about it enough.
yep. But as I recall at the retreat, that's exactly what we said. We put I don't remember what kind of time frame we put on it. But during the interim, if anybody comes up with anything, we'll take a second look at that. But the interim is going by rather rapidly, and this is the first I've heard of any of it.
So I didn't know we were really actively marketing it.
I don't know.
I don't, who have we talked to?
I don't know
Well,
that we did. I said during the interim, if someone comes up with a better idea,
Since the planning retreat late November, when we've had 2 holidays and we've had several personnel, we got a lot of other things on the plate. And so it has not been acted on yet. And so it's now, sort of cycling back to the top of the pile, if you will, of things we need to take some action on. But it's only been 2 months since the planning retreat, not even 2 months, a month and a half. And in the middle of that, we had Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and a lot of other city business to take care of. So, yeah, we're circling back on it now, I'd say. So so what I'm taking away from this is to continue to move forward with seeking ideas, proposals for commercial use that might yield some return for the city, and provide some value to the area, and bring that back to you all when we have something real and substantial. All right, let's move on then to the next item, which is the cemetery association agreement and landscape maintenance. And I know I think we have Anderson Wright and Alexa DeVetter here from the Historical Cemetery Foundation. And so I will open it up, Anderson, to you, if you would like to address the council about the plans that the Historical Cemetery, the Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation has for moving forward with managing grounds maintenance at the cemetery.
Hey, thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
On behalf of the Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation, this month we was in the process of renewing the 5-year contract with the city of Oxford, the owner of the cemetery. And also we was in the process of not renewing, but getting a new contract with a new contractor for the landscaping, managing the grounds. And that came about because of so many complaints that we were having of how it had been maintained. So I met with the mayor, I guess around October of last year. And with that, we really started looking for another contractor. And the previous contractor, they decided not to put up a bid. But we did receive 3 bids on maintaining the annual maintenance of the cemetery. And those 3 bids was with with Roger Ross, Naturescapes, Great Estates. And that the old contract was up in January. So since we did not renew it by January, we did Roger Ross. He was the one that was closest to where we was in the process of probably awarding the bid to, and we had him start maintaining that for this month, for January. And if you happen to have gone by there lately, you can see the difference it's made already from that the work he have started on it. But we in the process now of we would like to renew the 5-year contract with the city, and we would like to get a new contract with a maintenance agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. One of the things that I shared with you and that I'll say again, just in front of the council, was that there had been some discussion about whether or not the city council wanted to continue the agreement with the Historical Cemetery Foundation, whether that was desired or necessary, in part because of I think some of the frustrations with the previous grounds maintenance and repeated communication about that, and that it had never been resolved. And so there was some belief that maybe there'd be more direct accountability for the council as the people with the fiduciary duty of owning and stewarding that property that we've had agreement with you all to do on the behalf of the city, that we'd have more direct accountability maybe if we just directly contracted for the grounds maintenance, and then just recognizing that all the other aspects of managing the cemetery are already done by the city. The marking of grave sites before they're open, the permitting of, and the even the collection of the fees or the payment for the sites, et cetera, all that. And then so I mean, the city's basically managing the cemetery. We're just not managing the grounds maintenance aspect of it. And so there had been some discussion about whether it made more sense for the city to just take the full ownership of it on. And then the question would be, well, what is the relationship with the Historical Cemetery Foundation moving forward? Would that be that you all continue to steward the resources that have been, that are in your care, and submit funds to the city as a contribution to that grounds maintenance, as opposed to the other way? The way it's been now is we cut a check to the Cemetery Foundation every year to supplement the maintenance, grounds maintenance costs. And we also, take care of other things like tree maintenance, et cetera. So there could be that type of relationship where the Historical Cemetery Foundation continues to be the trustee of the funds that you all hold, and then support the ongoing maintenance with those funds on an annual basis. Or we could go back to, or continue, I guess, the relationship we've had where you all enter into an agreement with a new company that you believe will do a better job, and we enter in a new agreement with the Historical Cemetery Foundation. So that those conversations hadn't reached any resolution within the council. And so I told you timing was kind of a problem with having an answer for moving forward with Roger Ross and the timing of the grounds maintenance contract. So with that, I'm going to shut up and open it up and see what comments and questions we have from our council members.
Okay.
Laura McCandless, you look like you unmuted. I don't know if you.
Oh, I did. I was ready for the comments. No, I understand that the Cemetery Association, reading over their contract with the city, does more than just manage the grounds. I mean, they also husband the historical and natural resources, and some other things were listed there. And I don't know anything about our historic cemetery. And I know that they are, or I feel like they are, the caretakers of that sort of history and legacy, as well as handling the nuts and bolts management every day, or, you know, month to month or whatever, with the grounds maintenance. So, I mean, I'm kind of interested in hearing about that. And if we dissolve the partnership with them as it is now, who's going to take care of that aspect, that intangible aspect of the cemetery? And the other thing is, if we resolve the maintenance issue, then do we need to dissolve our current type of agreement? So those are just a couple questions I have.
So Anderson, would you mind maybe speaking to Laura's sort of question, or and clarify the services that, or say services, the stewardship that the Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation provides to the cemetery?
Yes. First, I would definitely like to continue with the Oxford Historical Foundation managing the landscape, because give us an opportunity to with a new contractor. But some of the other responsibilities we have, and for example, is Reverend Johnson and I, we are recently completed the radar detection for the marking of the those graves where there's no markers. We have a map located at the Whale House, where you can look up that particular family plot and easily located. We have other things that we manage. There often someone will call and asking about for is certain other care of the what is it okay to have a seat belt? I mean a seat, concrete seat located at their plot, and so many. There's many other things that the foundation provide. But mainly, I would like to continue with the maintenance. Give us an opportunity, because since we went through a thorough review of each one of these contractors, and I believe we found one that we can really rely on. So I'd appreciate it if you could give us an opportunity to continue.
Lynn Bohannon, do you have any questions or comments?
No, Laura actually covered the questions that I was thinking about too. So,
George Holt, how about you?
You call me?
Yes, sir. I was wondering if you had any.
A couple things. Actually, I guess you call it reimbursement that we pay to the cemetery. That started, I think, a little after the bottom fell out of interest rates. Their coffin they were at one point drawing enough on their investments to do most of the maintenance. It wasn't costing us as much as it's costing us now, because now they're not making any money off of their investments to do it. That was that point of it. The next thing is really, I don't see where we have the manpower to do it. we have to hire somebody else to do it, maybe 2 people, the way we operate around here.
To do what, George, in particular?
Cemetery properly,
I'm sorry?
maintain the grounds of the cemetery properly.
No, I don't think there was a question about whether we would have a contractor do the grounds maintenance or not, because as you said, we don't have the staff do that. Similar to the way we have someone else do the park. And let me just say, as an aside, I know Roger Ross very well myself and think the world of him, and I'm confident he will do a great job. And he said, fire me if I don't. I mean, he's looking to make us proud of the cemetery. He lives here in Oxford, et cetera. So there's not a question about that. It was more a question of whether we're the ones that hold the contract with the grounds maintenance contractor or the
$67,000, and the other was $27,000.
I'm sorry?
Bids, I looked at the bids. One of them was $77,000.
The Great Estates was
Right.
78.
The other was $27,000.
and it was Roger Ross at 22,000.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that when we talked about this before, we were thinking about taking over and having our people do it, I thought.
No, we even talked about getting bids for a contractor to do it, someone other than the company that was doing it, because they were not willing to increase their capacity to do the work at the level that to meet our standard, I guess.
Okay, well, my idea is just all this came about because we was not satisfied with how the cemetery was being maintained.
Right.
And so now I guess we feel like that we have somebody that might do it the way we want to do it. So maybe we'll give it a try. And if it doesn't work, then we'll come back next year.
Yeah, I support that. I guess it's just a question of do we want to sign a new agreement with the Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation and let them have that contract with Roger Ross's company, or do we want to contract directly with the company to do the grounds maintenance, so we have that direct line of accountability? That was really, to me, the question, what was in question.
So then we're gonna, if we contract directly with a contractor, we're just gonna withdraw everything from the Cemetery Historical Society?
I don't believe we have to. I think that the Historical Society, Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation, could continue to operate as the stewards of the funding, because some of it's money that was raised in campaigns, and then some of it is the share of the purchase of lots that the city sends to them. So they could remain the stewards of that and continue to make that contribution on an annual or semi-annual basis to support that maintenance, or they could dissolve as a 501c3 nonprofit, and the funds could be sent to the city, and we could put them in a restricted funds account explicit for the cemetery maintenance. I mean, so there's a couple of different paths that could happen if we wanted to be the ones to take on the cemetery in total.
Well, my opinion, and I'll leave it at that, is that if we're gonna let them stay in charge of everything else other than the maintenance, I don't see the need of doing that, since if we're gonna do the same contract and let them be the go-between.
George, I guess there's kind of a question in my mind of the everything else. I mean, we manage the use of the cemetery. If somebody wants to buy a plot, they come to us. If they want to open a grave, they come to us. And Jody goes over and he marks where the grave site is. The city gives them a permit. We coordinate with the funeral home in making all the arrangements. And they cut the check to us for purchasing the lot, and we send the check to the or wire transfer, whatever, to the cemetery foundation. So we're managing the cemetery. And honestly, my understanding is the city paid for the ground penetrating radar and mapping of the grave sites. Is my understanding. I may be wrong, and so those of you who are maybe longer on the council than me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the city paid for that ground penetrating radar and mapping of of all the grave sites. And we have the data at somewhere on one of our computers. And that was supposed to be converted to GIS data so that it could be made publicly available on a map that you could access online. So
that is true that the city paid for it, but that was the foundation. We came up with the numbering system, and the four is the actually what into the mapping and the information, where is that the customer could locate their that particular plot. I know that I helped on that. That was on the northwest side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know it was a partnership. I just was clarifying. Jody, did you start to say something?
I was going to say the guy's name was Charles Strozier. He did the GPR and everything, and the mapping and the drawings that we have at the city hall. The city paid him for that.
Yes.
Jeff Waring, did you want to make a comment or question?
Well, I feel as if it should be if Mr. Wright would like to continue doing it. I don't see any reason why not to, and leave it the way it is, because I think if we don't, we're going to be putting a further burden on Jody and controlling, watching out for the maintenance and everything else. And I think it's better myself to continue to leave it the way it is, as long as Mr. Wright's willing to do it.
Jim Wyndham, did you have anything? I don't know if you're muted.
The 5-year contract is not written in stone, and I suggested to the Cemetery Foundation that we renew it for 1 year to give them an opportunity to because we kind of pulled this on them as a surprise in a way, and then that would give everybody a year to think about it and because there are things involved like the monies they collected and that sort of thing. So we could do it for a year and then take another look at it. And if everything was satisfactory, redo it for 5 years.
Now, Jim, that was a two contractor. That was a contract with the city for 5 years. And then that was a contract with the Bandits agreement for 1 year.
But there's no reason, there's no law that says it's got to be a 5-year contract with the Cemetery Foundation. It could be a 1-year contract. Okay. And then re-look at it in 1 year and to give everybody more time to think about this, because when we started talking about this, the contract was almost up. And as David said earlier on other issues, we had Thanksgiving, we had Christmas, we had COVID, we had this, we had that, we had the other. So a year's contract with the foundation and a year's contract with that gentleman would give everybody a chance to rethink everything and take a deeper look at it if they so chose. That's just my thoughts.
I'm not understanding what the benefit of us taking on the full responsibility of this would be. Like what is the benefit of dissolving the like the foundation continuing?
And let me be clear, I'm not suggesting dissolving the foundation. And I hope no one's taken me to suggest that. My question was whether there would be more direct accountability for the grounds maintenance at the cemetery if the city was the one who held the contract with the grounds maintenance contractor. Because historically we have repeatedly expressed concerns about the quality of the maintenance of the cemetery through the foundation, and it wasn't resolved, and we didn't have any direct, we couldn't go and get any correction of things directly with the contractor. I think we've had some great, frank conversations with this Historical Cemetery Foundation about it, and they, they acknowledge that we need to raise the standard of care, particularly in the Northwest section, which frankly has looked like it's not being managed for the last couple of years, with weeds growing up and branches left and leaves left, et cetera. And I know, Roger, we'll take care of it and we'll do a good job. And I feel really good about that. But I'm one of not necessarily putting undue, bureaucracy in place if it made more sense to us directly contract with them on the grounds maintenance. But if y'all want to continue the way it's been and just trust that we're gonna, see better results and we can revisit this, then that's certainly, I'm not trying to get in the way of that.
Well, Mayor, we have, I think we had two city councilmen that was coordinators between the foundation and the city. Can we maintain that group and continue? And that would be then the city would still have some say so on the controlling of their maintenance agreement. How is Alexa, how does that sound?
Well, if I figure out how, I've unmuted myself.
Okay.
That sounds good to me. I understand David's concern, and I have felt it too, because I came sort of new into this organization of the Oxford Historical Cemetery Foundation, and I'm sort of learning the ropes. And I understand there was a long relationship with the previous caretakers, and a great affection grew there. And for a number of years, they did an outstanding job. And in the later years, things began to fall off, but the affection didn't. And so I think we've gotten ourselves into a bit of a mess. And I think that we can move forward. Definitely, I personally think that the person that at the moment who's doing the temporary job, who's been asked to do it for the last 2 weeks, will be excellent and will maintain the cemetery at a standard that the city can be proud of. I certainly sympathize with the city employees who've had to field the complaints, and to Anderson, who's had to field complaints about things not going right. I think that we sort of fell off the track. I think we're back on track. If the city would like to try for a year and give us a try to make sure that we've got our act together, I think that sounds good. And I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you, Alexa. It's good seeing you.
Oh, can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you. You on your phone?
I'm on my phone.
Yeah, we see you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm glad I'm dressed.
Glad I told you.
I would have had the same idea about not doing it if they hadn't changed contractors.
Yeah. So, well,
why that was a kind of I hate to say it, a good old boy thing.
Yeah, I came into it sort of in the middle of the year, and I didn't quite understand the vibe and what was going on. But I think in the past, I know years ago, and this particular contractor has done this for 37 years. I think the first probably 30 were great, and then things began to fall apart. And because of that, I remember Mr. Elizer trying year after year to find somebody to mow the grass, and the struggles that he went through, trying to get somebody to come and take basic maintenance of the cemetery. And, that's long ago and far away, but I think there was a lot of affection for the initial job that was done. And like everything, affection sometimes gets in the way of reality.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. So, I mean, if the council's comfortable with moving forward, I mean, I guess then kind of the question is, do you all want to do a 1-year interim agreement, just re-sign the agreement with the Cemetery Foundation for 1 year to revisit? And then, you know, if things look good and are running smoothly, go ahead and renew the agreement for a longer period? Or are you all comfortable going ahead and just jumping back into a new agreement based on the steps that the foundation has already taken to step up the game?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir, Mike.
I think the 1-year thing is probably in the best interest of both parties to see how things go. But I would suggest to the cemetery folks that they get a little better contract than just saying yes to the 22,000. Let the guy know that there could be a 30-day termination should he not continue the job at the right level, even though it's a 1-year contract. So they have a little bit more control over what is being done.
Yes, we have that in the agreement, and we wasn't in the process of awarding that contract to that particular person because of that was the lowest bidder, but that was the lowest. But we found out other things where we decided that would be the best. And out of all the complaints that we've had, and this particular person is right here in the city of Oxford, and he have people that's buried there, and himself, and I feel like he's closer to that the cemetery itself than even if we would have gotten that one with the highest bidder.
I agree, and I like that we're shopping locally. I mean, he's going to have more affection for the cemetery.
Yeah, I'm excited about Roger doing the work. I think he's got the right connection to the cemetery. Like you said, he has people buried there. He lives, you know, within like a few hundred feet of the cemetery. He's a man of integrity. You know, I think he's. And I'm not suggesting that previous folks weren't, but I'm just saying I think highly of him and would feel confident moving forward. So if y'all are comfortable, I think formally we have to vote at our February meeting for me to give me approval to sign a new agreement with the foundation. But sounds like the consensus is to do that maybe on a 1-year agreement basis, and you can go ahead and get a 1-year contract with Roger Ross, and then we can review as we come up on the end of the calendar year, and then go into 2023 with either longer term agreement or agree to part ways.
30 minutes.
Okay.
That sound agreeable to you, Anderson?
Yes, that sounds fine with me. And I'm sure that would be fine with the foundation board. Alexa?
Yes, fine with me.
Great. Well, we'll formally vote at the February, is it 7th meeting? I think it is. And in the meantime, I appreciate y'all getting Roger's team on it and making improvements already on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we will move to the next and last item on the agenda, which is the increase in compensation for city staff. We talked about this at the previous work session, and based on some of the discussion then, provided you all with additional information in your packet. I sent you previously an Excel file with the back data that went into this Excel file, thinking if you want to create your own spreadsheet or you want to amend any of the comparables or whatever you wanted to do to take a look at it, because I wanted to you all to understand that I did not come at this trying to be biased, but really trying to find the good representation and do a good analysis. And found in that the increased compensation put every single one of the positions within the range of the what seemed to be comparable city compensation. I mean, really, and I tried to break it down in different levels because there's a lot of ways you can look at it. It's not always apples to apples when you look at cities under 3,000, because not all cities are created the same, but did give you that view and for you to look at. And then the other thing we wanted to, and so then, sorry, Marcia provided you with the details on the full, what might be called the fully burdened cost of labor if folks took advantage of the healthcare and retirement options at the baseline salary versus the adjusted salary amounts and what that would be. And the net increase of labor cost was around $130,000. And then we looked at the budget and looked at the personnel costs alone versus and in terms of our budget versus what we project for the remainder of just the remainder of this fiscal year 22. We already have close to $200,000 worth of room to increase the from the baseline in terms of our labor costs. And then, you know, Bill and I obviously will be working with folks on putting together the FY23 budget, which will make sure integrates whatever decision you all make. So try to present you all with as much information, and so open it up to questions that folks may have and see where we are.
If I may start.
Yes, sir, George.
First of all, let me say this. I am not against raising our employees. Last year, I got with Matt and asked him, could we come up with a way to have our starting pay at least $15 an hour? We went through, and mostly he did, went through and tried to change some job descriptions and tried to come up with it, but he did not see where he could do it without having too much of a ripple effect. So we came up, I think, and raised from 12. We were starting out at $12 an hour. Our lowest paid person, $12.37, I believe it was, and we went up to $13 an hour. And at that time, I mentioned that we need to take a look at our appointed people because we needed to raise our city clerk, our police chief, and our city managers. We need to look at that. So I just want to let you know, I'm not against it. What I'm going to tell you is totally different from what you got here, because I did research. You sent out all the information, so I did my research too.
Yes, sir.
Now, we have asked the University of Georgia to do us a job classification compensation plan coming up now. We did this in 2006. And they went through a thorough review. They interviewed employees. They went through job descriptions. They evaluated those descriptions. And what they said here is that the system used to classify the jobs in the city of Oxford was an adapted version of the faculty evaluation system, which was developed by the Civil Service Commission, which is now the personnel management of the federal government, which is considered to be the state-of-the-art system in personnel administration. And I'm pretty familiar with that particular way it's done with my background in the feds. So they made us a chart and classified our employees. And we made some back wage adjustments at that time because we weren't paying according to their schedule that they made. They did their schedule to how they go about the same method that you used to do this. They came up with the schedule and they said, in order to keep our schedule up to date, we need to consider an annual at the cost of living and make an annual adjustments to your chart. I say that to say that our chart is not 14% off. We had every year, we would look at the cost of living and we made adjustments to our chart. I have gone back and looked at what a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 23 position was paid in 206. Well, it was done in 206. We started out in 207. In 207, 11 was $22,000. In 2021, it's now $27,443. If you go to the GS scale, the federal government scale, someone that was paid $22,000 at the same time, 207, in 21, they're paid $27,184. So we're paying $5,000 difference between 207 and 221. They're paying $4,482 to somebody in that same pay rate. I went through each one of these, and our pay chart has increased more than the federal pay chart over the last 14 years. So our pay chart is not 14% off. And I've looked at the stuff that you sent out. If I look at any city that's anywhere comparable to what we are, is that we're not all there. If I look at the police officers, back in 2006, University of Georgia said that they should be at a 14 level, which was $25,513. At that time, Councilman Wyndham had talked about raising our police officers, and we had done a survey of Covington, Conyers, Newton County, and a couple other cities. And we decided that we needed to pay our police officers more than what was supposed to be paid to them by University of Georgia. They had them listed as a 14 on the chart, so we moved them up to 17 and paid them $29,587 at that time, instead of $25,513 that was on the list for University of Georgia. So now we are paying our police officers $40,591, which is $11,000 more than the chart was back then. So the only thing I'm saying is that if we want to change the chart to 14%, that's fine. That's what you want to do, but don't send me information saying that justifies it, because it doesn't. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, George.
I can go down through and show you in each one of these is that how much we've increased our salaries 24% since 2007. The federal government has increased their chart 19% since 2007.
Again, I presented you all with comparables. I presented you with the source data for those comparables and gave you the Excel file for you to create your, an alternative comparable spreadsheet. And that's what I was presenting to you as additional point of information to see where does the increased pay for each position fall relative to those various.
But when I look at the cities with the comparable size as far as population, which actually you can't find anybody with only a few people we have. But when you look at the average pay going across the board, we're not that far off. If we're not even with most cities, if you go compare apples with apples. Only thing I say is that if we want to do that, fine. Now, I don't see why we need to pay University of Georgia to come up with another chart like they did before, because there's no way with what they presented to us 14 years ago, they're going to use the same method by 14% of what we got when we kept the chart up like they said. It's no way possible.
Thank you, George.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Don't we additionally have a caveat at the end of 2022 based on some findings that are coming from the University of Georgia?
That's what George Holt is referring to, is that the Carl Vinson Institute of Government will start in late spring on a compensation and classification study for us. And they were saying they would be finished around the end of the calendar year. And that part of that is to benchmark the city's positions against the market and show us where we are relative to the market, without telling us what we ought to be paying our employees, trying to show what the benchmarks are that they found for us to compare ourselves against. So,
No, if I may interject up here, no, they're gonna go a little further than that. They're gonna tell us by each employee, they're gonna set up job description and how they should classify on this chart. They're gonna tell
yes.
Not just it's information like you saying out here. It's not gonna be like this. This is gonna be a much better comprehensive study.
Yes, no, they're
report. I have the report from last time.
So does that mean we may make some sort of a change right now that is going to be eliminated or altered by the results of the study at the end of the year?
We don't know.
I mean, we don't know what the results of their study are going to be in terms of, what they're going to come back with. I mean, we started with the fact that we're not paying our lowest paid employees a livable wage. And so raising that lowest paid employee to $15 an hour is an increase of 14.1%. And then the question comes in about parity. Do you not raise anybody else's if you've raised the lowest paid employees up? And so what we were proposing for you all to consider was an across the board 14.1% adjustment in compensation. And we've shown you what the impact of that would be in terms of per year additional cost of $130,000 in personnel costs. And I've given you information on what surveys of salaries from other cities are, both what I've compiled and what the documents from which I pulled that, and to show you. And when in my opinion, when you look at where you look at those comparables, and you look at the salaries that we have versus the salaries we're proposing, that the proposed salary falls within the range every single time.
Well, I'll try to I really honestly try not to say any more than I have to in these meetings, because I have a knack of making people mad, and I don't need any more enemies. But to be honest with you, with all due respect to Bill, Andrew, Marshall, and Mark, those are appointed positions. They have negotiating skills, and they have ear to the ground as far as parity is concerned for their positions. The people that making less than $30,000 a year do not have those. They do not have the ear to the ground as to the comparable positions, and they are not a contractual situation. Parity was to people making less than $30,000 a year. And I cannot extrapolate that into extending that parity across the board, because that just defeats the definition of parity, in my opinion. So I can see raising the people less than $30,000 a year even prior to December, but I can't see putting it across the board to people that are already making substantial. Not that I object to anything they're making, because some of them are making. There are a few of them that need to be looked at.
Actually, Jim, if I may say that in the Now, charter and plus what University of Georgia did for us before, they specifically stated it does not include appointed people. I mean, they're not on, I'm only dealing with our schedule. Those people are not on our schedule.
Well, I was just looking at this Excel chart that David sent out.
I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want them to think that I had some, I didn't want them to get any increase.
I've spent most of my life making people mad anyway, so it doesn't bother me as much.
The city clerk, the police chief, the city manager, and who else? Actually, it's not on the chart. This doesn't cover them.
It should not.
Right. No, they're exempt employees. But that doesn't take away from the
employees. They're not considered employees as far as the charter says, as far as our pay chart is concerned. It's kind of, I guess, I don't want to say things, I guess, because that's what I've done for a living. Exempt employees doesn't have anything to do with this.
Exactly.
They're not employees as far as this payroll schedule is concerned.
Okay. And I don't want to get in a semantics discussion on that. They are employees of the city regardless of whether they're on the chart or not on the chart. They are appointed.
We always looked at them different. When we do the schedule, then we decide what adjustments we want to make for our appointed people.
Sure.
And we've been doing it all the time since I've been here, 14, 15 years.
Exactly.
Sure. And I'm saying it's time to do it again. And I've given you the numbers that, that I found for comparables and what I'm suggesting. And I am suggesting that we include increases for those appointed officials. We did increase already the pay for the police chief. So it would not impact on him. It would include the city clerk and the city manager. But if you all want to put them aside and focus on the schedule employees and raising salaries there, then that's fine. We could do that. And we can revisit the pay of the appointed employees separately. But I stand by my conviction and by my conviction, by basically the numbers that suggest that we are not paying our people sufficiently aligned with the market. And so I am proposing that we make the changes that have been proposed. And here are the specific numbers that those represent and the impact that has on our annual expenditures as well.
Only thing I say, if you look at the numbers hard enough, I don't see how you can come out with what you're saying. I don't
either.
Show me the analysis. Show me the alternative analysis.
We said, no, I'm not going to show you analysis. I didn't do one. I'm done. All I was interested in people not making a living wage. Somebody making $85,000 a year is making a living wage. 14% of $85,000 is a lot more than 14% of $27,000. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm just one person on this thing.
But what Jim is saying is what happened out in the marketplace. When the minimum wage go up, what few times it has gone up in my career is the people that was making minimum wage, when they go up, the manager, the other people who are making money, they don't change. Only a few people who may be making just a little more minimum wage may get a raise. Now, I know this would be a fact of looking at thousands of payrolls over the last 30 years. Is that doesn't trigger a pay raise for the owner or for the manager, or for all the people who already have pay that's way above the standard of living. Now, it does have some rippling effect, true enough, and we have to look at that, but it doesn't have a 14% effect over the whole schedule. That's the only thing I'm saying. And again,
what are you proposing that we do?
This is the thing. It takes time. You can't do this over 2 work sessions. In other words, I've been at this for the last 3 or 4 days, all day. That's all I've been doing, putting aside everything else because I wanted to have my information correct. So that's why I went back and took the federal pay scale and University of Georgia system they use, the same system the federal used. And they put in, according to what our people were doing back in 206, what they should be paid. Okay?
George, the University System of Georgia is in the process of doing a compensation study
Right,
and looking at adjusting their compensation based on changes in the market.
right. So it's gonna make some changes, but what I'm saying is not gonna change 14%.
I'm saying to you that the state of Georgia's university system is evaluating compensation structure for its employees
Right?
as we speak.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a lot of discussion and adjustment that's going on in the world in terms of you know, trying to adjust compensation to the market in you know, from maybe some other previously existing systems and structures. You're talking about a class study that was done in 2006, 12 or was it? Sorry, 17 years ago.
Right.
16 years ago.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though is this, the cost of living since then has been, I mean, as far as pay raises, has been pretty near for the last 10 years almost, pay raises there. So I mean, that's, you know, here there. But what I'm saying is this, normally you look at the cost of living index to determine the increase in the cost of living, increase wages. And that's the way the federal scale does. And it increases, although they don't give you the full thing all the time, but it's based on the cost of living. And so when they did our chart, they said in order to keep the chart up to date, you have to consider an annual raise based on the cost of living. And we did that.
George, you know that there's typically a CPI adjusted increase, and then there's merit increases on top of that. I mean, people don't typically, unless they're subpar, just ride out the annual steps in their pay scale. They jump in their pay scale to, you know, stay in pace with the pay for that individual based on their qualifications and capabilities. There's a market within that that structure that's at play. It's not so automatic and rigid and structured where each year you just get this amount of money increased in your pay. There are a lot of things that can happen to increase the pay that you get paid.
I mean, you know, hey, you pay whatever you want to pay.
What's that?
I'm speaking if you look at the state chart, you know, normally most municipalities have a payroll chart. And I think that's where most of this comes from, is what's on their charts.
Right. They've responded to the
job on your portfolio. You have a job and you have a certain amount of money paid for that particular job, regardless of who's in that job. And
right.
They have steps, goes from 1 on through maybe 10, whatever. And you make adjustments to that particular chart according to the cost of living.
The data that's in the Excel file and that's in the PDFs that are the different, those are survey data that cities respond to the Department of Community Affairs survey. And yes, they look at their pay scale for that position, and they submit that to the survey, to the DCA's response to survey. So then I've taken that data and put it into the Excel file, and I've tried to look at cities that would be that responded to the survey that are comparable, but also cities that are not comparable in the sense that they're the same population or even same budget, but they are in the same market area just for reference purposes, but then getting shown you all what the average for cities with population under 10,000, under 5,000, 4,000, under 3,000, and then an average of a select cohort, which I felt was most appropriate comparables for the city of Oxford. So that's where that information, that's the approach I took, was taking information about the market. That is, what are people paying their employees today for these various positions that we have?
What I was saying, then I'm gonna leave it alone. If I take the same information you said, because I got all that spread out here, all different, 2 or 3 different charts saying the same thing, and some of the same charts said something different than what it said last time. But anyway, is that if I go through all of this, I still don't come up with our positions versus these positions that we're 14% off. That's the only thing I'm saying. The same information you got, I don't come up with 14% off.
Okay.
I would like to promote, I'd like to propose that we, if possible, that the ones that are making less than $30,000 a year or $15 an hour be raised up to that. And since we're having to pay in the Carl Vincent study and it's going to be available in December, then people that are making $40,000 a year now are going to continue to eat to then. And I think that they could wait, because we look at those on a frequent basis. They are not looked at on an infrequent basis. And so it's not like we're just saying no, 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 no. I'm just saying, let's get up to $30,000 a year as our base salary, and then wait on Carl Vincent the rest of it. Because if Carl Vincent says we're $10,000 high on this one, there's no way to take it back. So that's just, that's my proposal, because that's what started this whole thing, is getting people up to a $15 minimum wage is a living wage. And you can't, I mean, you just can't live on that with one person working. You're going to have 2 or 3 people working. So that's what I think we should do. Everyone except the ones under $30,000 a year should have been with us long enough to know that we're not going to keep somebody down just for the sake of keeping somebody down. And that's a fair and reasonable way to do it, in my opinion.
So I agree with Jim, because we're investing a chunk in this study, which is supposed to be quite comprehensive and definitive from the Carl Vinson Institute. And it'd be nice to actually use that and make data-driven decisions in the end. And as Jim points out, you can't give a raise and then go, oh, whoopsie, and retract that. Yeah, I agree with what Jim said.
Let me
So,
Can I ask a question? Could I ask a question, please?
yeah, Bill, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand the use of the chart. My experience with these type charts is when the grade is, of course, assigned to an employee based on the skill set and education and the job difficulty that they have. And then the step is going each year. So A, B, C, D is the steps. The steps are 2.5% apart, and the steps are meant to be done every year. They're not been. They've been done every other year. So instead of doing 2.5%, which is what apparently UGA told us to do, we've only been doing 1.25. If you take 1.25 times 16 years, that's 20% without even looking at the compounding. So if Mr. Holt is saying that we were supposed to be following this chart, we haven't been doing that. We've been skipping every other year. So I don't know how we're not 14% off, because we're 16% off if you just look at the 1.25 as opposed to 2.5. I will also say that I talked to the mayor earlier today, and he can tell you this, and I would want my name taken out of this entire consideration, because I don't want the city manager to become a lightning rod for this situation. I'll also say that if you raise people up to just 15 an hour, then you will create you'll create an effect of putting them against people who've been here longer. They'll actually probably leapfrog people who've worked here longer, or be compressed against people who've been here longer, which isn't fair to those people. And that's why you have to look at people that are above the 30,000. So you can't just simply say, I'm going to take the people making $13.14 an hour and take them to 15, because then they'll be leapfrogging people who've been here for 2 or 3 years.
if I may say, Bill, that's exactly what me and Matt went through when we were trying to get to $15 an hour, that we knew that we would have to raise maybe 3 or 4 positions up above that, because it would affect the next, say 10, it would affect 11. So we kind of did something there. That's why we didn't go all the way up. We went to 13.
Right.
We're going to have too much of a rippling effect. Now, here's the thing, that chart doesn't say that you got to move out every year. That didn't say that. That's up to.
I'm telling you, that was the intention of the University of Georgia. When you were given that chart, that's what you were supposed to do. So
I got the report here that they gave us, and nothing in that report indicate that you got to raise them by that chart. In other words, normally what that says, and even on the federal chart, it doesn't raise every year. The first couple of years ago every year, then it goes every 2, then it goes every 3. A few years ago, we had a situation where we wasn't moving them. So we decided that we would institute every 2 years that you would move up the chart. So we have started that. We started moving across the chart, but we wasn't moving across the chart at one time. But there's nothing in the law says that, or in the University of Georgia says that when you have a situation like that, you move every year across that chart.
well, you're supposed to. I've worked with these charts and I've worked with the University of Georgia before, and you're supposed to go up every year. You didn't follow the chart. I mean, we can ask University of Georgia that, and that's what they'll tell you.
Well, there's 2 different types of increases. The moving across the chart is for performance, and changing the chart itself is changing the whole
CPI.
chart.
Yeah.
So it's the performance increases that we've been moving every 2 years because that's what's in our personnel manual right now. And it has been.
In the chart, you don't just automatically move to this next year because you came to work half of the time. Nobody uses a chart just to move. You automatically get a move across the chart. You have to at least come to work.
So one of the, I guess, I would say considerations.
Back to Bill, come back to something you said. I want to clear up this. That's why I said is that what I'm talking about is people on the chart. I'm not talking about appointed people. So that's totally different because I made it clear when we were trying to get to $15 an hour that we need to look at our appointed people because we need to do something for them because they weren't being paid sufficient.
I have a concern about stopping at $30,000. That's going to create animosity in my office because there's one person who will not get a raise.
No, we can't stop it there. That's why I said it takes time to look at this and come up with how you can do it. It can be done, but you can't just do it every other week. You gotta have a group and sit down. It takes time to figure out how you can come up to $15 an hour and not pay a person, say, that's making $50,000 or $60,000, 14% more.
Well, first of all, George, we first talked about this a month ago. So it's not like we just popped it on you two weeks ago, and you've had the spreadsheet. You all have had the spreadsheet for a week or two. And certainly pointed you to the data and information. I'm not trying to make a rush decision. However, I am sensitive to the fact that we're trying to rebuild our police department. We're an officer 1 plus the chief, and we've got to be able to attract police officers. And if we're not paying our police officers a competitive salary, then we're going to be extremely challenged in giving Mark England the team that he needs to fully staff his police department. So I mean, that's one consideration, is by waiting until December before we'd even have the data results, and then we're going to have discussions again. It'll be February or March of next year before we're doing anything. And we need to take action now. We're losing people because we're not paying our people not just a livable wage, but a competitive wage. And so, I mean, the data, I didn't make this data up. This is, and you all have the source data. And I mean, I'm not as interested in looking at the federal GS schedule or the state schedule. I'm interested in looking at the cities that we're competing with to hire qualified people. And what are they paying their people, and how would we be successful in recruiting good quality people if we're not paying them at least comparable salaries? And so, I think we've got to do something in the shorter term. I'm not saying today, but something in the shorter term, and then we can continue to make refinements and adjustments a year from now. But we've got to do something sooner.
If you want to raise the chart by 14%, fine, raise the chart by 14%. But I don't have to agree with that because that's not where it should be done. That doesn't mean that we don't do it, but just you send me stuff and I look at it, and it just doesn't pan out to what we are saying. But if we want to do it, fine. I don't have a problem if you want to raise everybody 15%. If we can pay them, pay them.
So, and for the record, I want to say that I agree with what David says about looking at market forces that don't necessarily follow a chart. So, I mean, it's obviously a complex situation.
That's what these charts here kind of look at that he sent out.
Well,
It gives you comparable cities and located near us.
Jeff, did you want to say something? And then Mike,
Yeah.
I'll go to Mike after Jeff.
Okay, right now, there's a crunch for labor no matter where you go, okay? And the rate of inflation is gotten everybody concerned and worried. And this thing is not going to stop for a long time. We've got to do something George, I'm in agreement with you. I understand where you're coming from and looking at the charts and everything else. To be real honest with you, you almost got to throw the chart out the window at this particular time. And the reason for it is the rate of inflation and the labor force out there is at a drastic shortage for all kinds of reasons. We can't find mechanics I don't care if I pay him $100,000 a year. You're not going to find decent mechanics at this particular time. So, I mean, I'm in agreement, to be real honest with you, with David. I think it's an evil necessity. We don't have to do it today, but I think we really need to consider it because of the things that are going on, and we need help and qualified help, especially police officers and some of these people to be able to survive and to be able to, have a living wage where they're not struggling every day of the week. And Lord knows where it's going to end at this particular time. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's a disaster out there, and it's a disaster every way you look at it. So, I mean, I think we need to continue to talk about it, but not very long. I think something needs to be done fairly quick. And with logic being where it is, I have to agree with David that I hate to say it, but 14.1% is not going to kill us. Now the $30,000 beer. I mean, I don't know. That may be something we have to really look at and consider before we vote on anything like this. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Mike, ready?
There's several factors that come up. There's been a lot of good points picked out. But putting cost of living has always been in there. You have to remember that Social Security just raised their payment 6% because of cost of living from the previous 2 years. They've never been over about 2% prior to this. So you've already got a big jump that the government has accepted and had to face. We as a city have lost people year after year in the last 5 years that I'm totally aware of, over $1 or $2 in pay to another city. But yet now, because of COVID has thrown any chart kind of out the window for companies. You're looking at companies like Walmart that love to give $11 as their top pay, having to go to $16, $17 as their permanent pay scales now. And when you give a raise to the non-exempt folks, it has to be at all classifications on an equal basis, because that's the only way the chart will flow right. I strongly disagree with capping it at $30,000. If they're non-exempt, they need to get the amount. Now, the 14.2% has always been based on our lowest person getting the $15. So if that's what we're going to do, is use $15 as the base mark and 14% is it, then that's what everybody in non-exempt needs to get. And you look at the exempt folks and how we set up our scales later in December after UGA comes back with that information. And we need to start sooner than later.
Correct.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Lynn Bohannon, I don't know if we've had a chance to give you or given you a chance to speak. If you have any comments or questions.
I was just trying to take it all in, and I agree with certain aspects of everybody's opinions. If I'm understanding right, I think Mike kind of summed up how I pretty much feel about it. And I think it was said earlier. Is it the appointed positions? Are those what we're considering the exempt? Some of the terminology kind of threw me a little bit.
So the chief, the city clerk, the police chief, the city clerk, and the city manager are in a separate category of employee
Okay,
from
so
the other.
they're the
employees.
ones that we're considering waiting until December.
That's what Mike was suggesting, is that we put them aside for a later date to discuss them and focus on the.
Just that they're not a part of what I was figuring on the chart. I mean, we can do it anytime we want to.
Yeah, we could revisit it later, Lynn, but just thinking that we consider them separate from
I think that's
scheduled employees.
I think that's what we should do, and it has nothing to do with anybody as far as on a personal or an emotional level. I do think we need to act sooner rather than later, as far as the increase on the minimum wage and so forth. But I kind of agree with making those three as separate, like revisiting those later.
I appreciate it. Am I leaving anybody out? I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share your thoughts. So would the balance of the council, or could we get consensus on that moving forward with a 14.1% increase among all the scheduled employees, the non-exempt employees?
Mr. Mayor, can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
If you look at our chart, the lowest pay, well, we did have a 10, but look like somehow on the sheet that we got saying what people currently making, I don't see anybody at 10 anymore. They moved everybody up one step for some reason.
Yep.
We got 11, 12.
11 is the lowest. Mm-hmm.
Huh?
11 is the lowest, yeah.
Yeah, in other words, I don't know when 11, 12, 13, and 15, when those changed on the pay scale last year, they weren't at that rate. They were 10, 11, 12, and 14. The pay itself hadn't changed, but just the grade level has been changed for some reason.
It changed July 1st of last year.
Why did you change the grade level?
That was part of Matt's realignment of the positions, and I wasn't involved in that process, but he came to the conclusion that the lowest position needed to be moved up from a 10 to 11.
And everybody else moved up. 13.
The position above that one moved up. I believe we adjusted the position above that, but Stacy's position did not change. So the first three positions in the clerk's office changed, but Stacy's did not change. And also some changed in Public Works. One or two changed in Public Works.
If you go back and look at the difference between our lowest paid person on the chart, well, I said, put this way, chart 10 level, the 10 on the chart versus the 23 on the chart, it's about $30,000 difference in the pay between those two individuals. The one we're talking about raising and the one on the top is already $30,000 difference between those two pay.
Did you say that again, George?
I have to go back and make sure, between the 10 on our chart and the 23 on our chart, beginning, I'm not talking about what somebody's in that position is making, but as far as the chart is concerned, it's about $30,000 between the pay for the lowest paid person on our chart to the highest paid person on our chart.
Okay. Was there anything based on that you,
No, I just, you know, I just look at things in perspective. If I got a person not quite making minimum wage, and I got another person that's making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, the fact that I have to raise my person's minimum wage doesn't mean I have to raise my person that's making $70,000, $80,000 a year, who's already making $50,000 more than my lowest paid person on my shift, on my job, on my company.
Well, I don't know that it's gonna have anything to do with anything, but this, I'm glad Marcia brought up about Stacy, because Stacy has been shortchanged before. And that was some time back, and I think you recall that incident, George, where they were giving her a 2.5% raise, and instead of paying her the level of job or called for, and she'd been doing it for a year. And we got bent out of joint about that because she was not being treated fairly at that time.
Just for transparency, Stacy is on the call,
Well,
but I didn't say anything I wouldn't want her to hear.
well, I didn't say anything I wouldn't want her to hear either. So that's the way it is. And you know, and I don't mean to belittle. Sound like I'm putting down Bill or you, Marcia, or Mark. Y'all, you know, you do a great job so far. Bill's done a great job. I expect a great job out of Mark, but it's just not the same thing.
I understand. I don't take it as a personal attack or anything like that. I understand completely.
Actually, that's why I don't want anybody to say that I don't want anybody to get raised. I just like to do things right. The thing is that when Matt and I came up with these increases where you had to change shifts or change grades, I said then, I think Marcia's probably on the phone, I said then is that we need to look at our city clerk and our city manager and our police chief at the same time. Because at that point, they were underpaid. Our city manager left that was underpaid. So now we had to get one in and try to pay him what we can keep him. But we hadn't done anything until now to our police chief. But we hadn't done anything for our, she's here, but I'm gonna say it, we hadn't done anything for our city clerk. I think we should before we lose her.
If I can just interject here for myself, just so you know, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't expect anything. I would prefer you do the 14%, or somebody even suggested maybe a 15%. Not that I have any say so in it, but we do need to attract quality people. I can just tell you from just being here for the last week, everything I've heard in this meeting is very relevant to everything from the signage to the rebranding of how you want your city to look. The city needs to be proud. I believe we do need to attract the most qualified applicants for this police department who are part of this community. And not to take anything away from the officer that we have, but he drives a long way to come to work here. And, you know, we had an incident last week where he searched the car, and I asked him, I said, how did you search it? And he said, I just searched it, put him in the back of my car. And I asked him, I said, please don't do that, because I don't want to drive to Cartersville, but I don't want to drive to Cartersville and tell your wife that you've been shot and killed on a traffic stop by searching a vehicle. So from my standpoint as the police chief, and what I can tell you from the surrounding areas, the city of Locust Grove is looking to increase their salary of their officers to $50,000 just to attract an officer, the quality candidate that you need. And your officers, not to say that the officers here were any less, but if we can attract a candidate who's very well qualified, who may want to work for Covington. And if we're paying more than the city of Covington, why wouldn't they want to work for the city of Oxford? So I have taken no offense to anyone saying that none of the appointed people should get a raise. I'm perfectly fine where I'm at. And I do believe that if you are going to increase it, it should be for the non-exempt employees.
Let me say that, I hope you didn't get me mixed up. I didn't say that the appointed people shouldn't get a raise. I said the appointed people are not on this chart.
Oh, no, I'm not upset about anything. I mean, if you gave me a pay raise, that would be great. If you don't give me a pay raise, that'd be fine too. I'm not taking offense to anything, keep that. And I'm not looking for any kind of an increase at all. But if it is at all possible to go ahead and voice my opinion for police officers, I would think that pay increase would be a very good incentive for us to attract quality police officers for the department.
I would agree that when we talk about police officers, that we need to really make sure that we pay so that we can get qualified, decent police officers.
Okay, so if we go ahead and do the 14.1% across the board, with the exception of the appointed positions, is there anything that says we cannot revisit individuals and maybe do a reevaluation on an individual basis also? Because what I'm hearing, just as an example, is Stacy's position. Can we not go in, if we do the 14.1, can we not also later in the year, or, you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, and so Lynn, part of what like George was saying, when University of Georgia, Carl Vinson Institute of Government from UGA is working with us, they'll be looking at each position and the job descriptions for those positions. They'll be talking to the people in those positions about what they actually do in their job, and they'll be, providing us with some analysis of whether that job should be classified in a different way, or how it should be classified, and what are the sort of comparable benchmark pay scale would be. So, I mean, there's a potential that what they do is going to lead to us increasing parity within existing positions held by individuals. That said, I think we can always look at specific individuals and specific situations and see whether or not, we want to make additional adjustments based on a variety of factors.
Well, I mean, I feel like we need to make an attempt to give these people some relief financially. I mean, even going from 13.15 to 15 it'll help. But when you really look at it, it's not an extreme increase. So I'm leaning toward the 14.1 for all positions, with the exception of the appointed ones, and then, reevaluating if we want to wait until the Carl Vinson study, or whatever it's called, is done, or whatever. But I feel like we need to do something.
Laura, I think I just want to clarify, are you also supportive of the non-exempt employees, the schedule, people that are on the schedule?
Yes.
Across the board, 14.1% bump for all of them.
Yeah. And then reassess in the fall when we get the information from Carl Vinson.
So if we come back on February 7th for our first meeting, voting meeting in February, put on the agenda to raise the non-exempt employees that are on the schedule by 14.1% for all positions. We have pretty much a consensus vote on that, or do we need to talk about it more? It looks like we're we can move forward with that piece, and then we can revisit, or we can visit the others and maybe even look at some individual cases, or let the UGA's work complete by the end of the calendar year.
Actually, we shouldn't wait for UGA to finish what they're gonna do before we decide what we want to do on appointed people, because they're not included in that.
Right, we could make decisions on them before then, yeah, if we wanted to, absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, great. Well, if sounds like we've reached a reasonable resolution on this, to move forward with 14.1% increase for all of our scheduled employees, non-appointed employees, non-exempt, whatever the right terms are, but I think we all know what we're talking about, the people on the schedule.
Mayor Edie,
Yes.
I just want to go on record and say that I echo what Mark said, and it's not about me right now. I want my employees to, earn the money that they deserve and to be able to keep them here. And I think Jody does too. We haven't really talked about Jody's group much, but I know this is an issue for him as well, that he loses linemen as soon as they get trained to other places. And it's I didn't come here for the money, and I'm not going to turn down a raise, but this isn't about me getting a raise.
I just don't feel like we can afford to lose anybody. I think we have a good team. I think everybody works well together, and it's going to be really sad if we lose someone because we are refusing to try to help them.
I appreciate all the discussion. I appreciate all the thought.
I said one thing, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, go ahead, George.
We need to look at our city clerk by February 1st. Because if we're gonna look at everybody else, we're gonna probably have somebody making more than city clerk.
Right. No, I want to look at the appointed.
I just want to make sure that we don't end up having somebody making more than the city clerk.
Yeah, no, I absolutely want to look at that, George, ASAP. Yes, thank you. All right. Well, that's all of our agenda items. Back and make sure to recap here. We're going to look at, we're going to try to gather together the sign, the wayfinding plan work that Kay Lee had done for us previously, and make sure we've got that and revisit, and then have some, maybe a subgroup take a look at that with Bill. I think Jeff and Jim specifically expressed interest in that discussion. We're going to move forward with the LCI proposal, Livable Centers Initiative proposal, to potentially vote on it in February 3rd. If not, we'll do a special call on the front end of our mid-February meeting. So that can be submitted. We're going to actively and aggressively seek proposals for use of the Yarborough House. That would then be a basis for us to decide how much or if we want to invest money in the Yarborough House for its future use. We're going to do we're going to vote in February, meeting in February, to formally approve the 1-year agreement with the Cemetery Foundation. Considered at the end of the calendar year. And then we're going to vote at the.
You're fading away, David.
Sorry?
You're fading
I'm sorry.
away.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm leaning back too much. So we're going to do a 1-year agreement with the Cemetery Foundation, and then we're going to do a vote on a 14.1% increase across our scheduled employees on our February meeting as well. That's a recap. Did I miss anything? All right. That's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Yep, good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.